Hello and welcome to Alden Carrow's Poetry Podcast. I'm Alden Carrow, poet, walker and author of Somerset in Verse, Exmoor Levels in Poetry. This is a podcast for people who suspect, as I do, that the world is moving too quickly and that something quietly extraordinary waits for anyone willing to slow down, listen closely and pay proper attention to it. In every episode, I share two poems. The first is a guest poem from the wider world of verse, something that has stayed with me, or troubled me, or refused to let me go. The second is one of my own, drawn from the fells, the coast, the weather, and the strange beauty of ordinary days. And for your chance to win a signed copy of Somerset in Verse, Exmoor Levels in Poetry, I invite you to suggest a future guest poem by emailing me at aldencarrow78@gmail.com. That's aldencarrow78@gmail.com. The next guest poem will come from one of you. Today we are climbing the most mythological hill in England. This week's walk takes us up 158 metres of Somerset sandstone that has been called the Isle of Avalon, the burial place of King Arthur, and a good deal else besides. I want to tell you now that my poem mentions none of it. We begin, though, with the legend at full volume, with a dying king being carried away to an island where the weather can't reach him. So pour something warm, settle in, the wind is up, the light is going, and there is poetry to be found. Before we go further, let me put this week's theme plainly, because the whole episode turns on it. The legend promises no weather. The hill has never once been spared it. Hold on to that for later. Alfred Lord Tennyson has appeared on this show once before. We had the Kraken back at episode 25, and he returns today because he wrote the single most influential description of Avalon in the English language. First, though, a word about the man. He was born in Lincolnshire in 1809, into a rectory household that was, by any measure, difficult. His father had been disinherited in favour of a younger brother, and the resulting bitterness ran through the family in the form of drink, illness and worse. Tennyson went up to Cambridge, and there he met Arthur Henry Hallam, who became the closest friend of his life. Hallam died suddenly in 1833 at 22 of a brain hemorrhage. Tennyson was 24, and he never entirely recovered. That matters because the poem we are about to hear was begun almost immediately afterwards. The first version, called Morte d'Arthur, was written in 1833 and published in 1842. Decades later, he expanded it and folded it into his great Arthurian sequence, Idylls of the King, where it became the final book, The Passing of Arthur, published in 1869. That's the version I'm reading today because it opens with a line the earlier version didn't have, and it's the line this episode needs. He became Poet Laureate in 1850 and held the post for 42 years, longer than anyone before or since. He died in 1892. Two things to listen for. The first is the famous opening line, which people quote constantly without knowing where it comes from. The second is the description of Avalon itself, and in particular how Tennyson chooses to describe it, because he doesn't tell you what's there. He tells you what doesn't happen there. No hail, no rain, no snow, no loud wind. It's a place defined almost entirely by the weather it's exempt from. Notice too that Arthur himself isn't certain of any of it. He says in the middle of his own farewell that his mind is clouded with a doubt. Here's an excerpt from Alfred Lord Tennyson's The Passing of Arthur. And slowly answered Arthur from the barge, the old order changeth, yielding place to new, and God fulfills himself in many ways, lest one good custom should corrupt the world. Comfort thyself, what comfort is in me? I have lived my life, and that which I have done may he within himself make pure. But thou, if thou should never see my face again, pray for my soul. More things are wrought by prayer than this world dreams of. Wherefore let thy voice rise like a fountain for me night and day. For what are men better than sheep or goats that nourish a blind life within the brain, if, knowing God, they lift not hands of prayer, both for themselves and those who call them friend? For so the whole round earth is every way bound by gold chains about the feet of God. But now farewell. I am going a long way, which thou seest, if indeed I go, for all my mind is clouded with a doubt, to the island valley of Avalon, where falls not hail or rain or any snow, nor ever wind blows loudly, but it lies deep meadowed, happy, fair with orchard lawns and bowery hollows, crowned with summer sea, where I will heal me of my grievous wound. What I want to draw your attention to is what the passage is actually doing, because it's more interesting than a simple promise of paradise. Look at how Avalon is built. Tennyson gives us 4 things it doesn't have before he gives us a single thing it does. No hail, no rain, no snow, no loud wind. The positives arrive afterwards, and they are gentle, almost domestic: meadows, orchards, hollows, a summer sea. But the foundation of the description is subtraction. Avalon isn't primarily a place with things in it, it's a place with things taken out. And what has been taken out is weather. Not war, not grief, not death, weather. The ordinary, relentless physical process by which the world wears at everything standing in it. That's a remarkable choice, and I don't think it's accidental. Arthur is dying of a wound. What is promised isn't merely survival, but exemption, a place where the eroding forces simply don't apply. Then there's that extraordinary parenthesis, if indeed I go, for all my mind is clouded with a doubt. Tennyson puts uncertainty inside the consolation itself. Arthur isn't confident. He's hoping out loud in front of the last of his knights, and admitting in the same breath that he doesn't know. Every reader who has ever been offered comfort they wanted to believe and couldn't quite manage to believe will recognise that line. And the opening, the old order changeth, yielding place to new, is doing something else again. It's Arthur consoling somebody else at the exact moment he most needs consoling himself. Bedivere is losing his king. Arthur, who is losing everything, tells him this is simply how the world works. Now, that's the version of this place I didn't write. Glastonbury Tor rises 158 metres out of the Somerset levels, and I want to be clear about what it is, because almost everything said about it in public is said in a different register entirely. Glastonbury Tor is a residual outlier. That's the technical term. The rock that surrounds it was softer and it's gone, eroded, carried off, subtracted over long stretches of time. What remains is a hard cap of Bridport sand sitting on a core of yielding Durham clay, and it stands there for the simple reason that it wore away more slowly than everything else. The Tor isn't a hill that rose, it's a hill that was left. Its slopes carry 7 terraces running horizontally around the sides. Nobody knows what they are. They might be medieval field systems. They might be natural bedding planes in the rock. They may be something else. The National Trust, which owns the hill, is candid about this. The origins are uncertain, and the leading suggestions include agriculture, defence, and a processional labyrinth for pilgrims. My poem says their disputed origins vanish into the steep soil, which is a more honest position than any of the confident ones. The tower at the summit is St. Michael's. The first church here was timber, and on the 11th of September 1275, an earthquake destroyed it. That isn't local legend, it's in the British Geological Survey record. The shock was felt in London, Canterbury and Wales. It brought down houses and churches across England, and the epicentre was probably somewhere near Portsmouth or Chichester. The hill's own shape may have amplified it at the summit. A stone church replaced it in the 14th century. That lasted until 1539, when the dissolution of the monasteries reached Glastonbury, and everything but the tower was pulled down and the stone carted off elsewhere. In November of that year, Richard Whiting, the last abbot of Glastonbury Abbey, then in his late 70s, was dragged up this hill and hanged, drawn and quartered at the top of it, along with 2 of his monks. So, a hill that exists because everything around it eroded, a church flattened by a documented earthquake, an abbot quartered at the summit, a tower now roofless and held upright by iron tie bars, its mortar joints pitted and blown hollow, and beside it a painted concrete pillar marking the geodetic peak, because at some point somebody needed to know precisely how high this was. One last thing about the hill, and it's the closest the documented account comes to magic. The flat, wet ground around it produces, on certain mornings, an optical effect called Fata Morgana. Layers of air at different temperatures bend the light, and the Tor appears to float free of the land, an island in the mist. It's the reason the Isle of Avalon story attached itself here rather than anywhere else, and it isn't a vision, it's refraction. Not one of those things is a legend. All of them are on the record. Here is Glastonbury Tor. The plain is a flat expanse of winter water, where the softer Jurassic rock was stripped and carried off. What remains is a resistant cap of Bridport sand, rising 158 metres into the wind, protecting a core of yielding Durham clay beneath, a residual outlier left standing by the slow subtraction of the marsh. Gravity pulls the saturated topsoil down the incline. The flanks are scarred by 7 horizontal terraces whose disputed origins vanish into the deep soil. Movement here is strictly funneled into linear corridors. Boots grind the perennial grass to a slick brown paste, exposing the compacted earth to the rain. At the summit, the wind accelerates against the stone. St. Michael's Tower stands anchored by iron tie bars, a roofless rebuild raised after a documented earthquake felled the timber church in 1275. Here, Abbot Whiting was quartered in 1539. The mortar joints are pitted and blown hollow. The horizon compresses into a 2-dimensional ring. Beside the masonry, a painted concrete pillar marks the geodetic peak. When summer evaporation drives the slopes, the underlying clays shrink and deeply fracture. A seasonal pulse of swell and contraction beneath the mass. Now on to our discussion this week, refusing the legend. I want to talk about the decision behind that poem. because it's the hardest one I have made in this entire series, and I'm not certain I was right. Glastonbury Tor is the single most mythological hill in England. It's been identified as the Isle of Avalon since at least the 12th century, when the monks of Glastonbury Abbey announced they had found the graves of Arthur and Guinevere, an announcement that came, as it happens, shortly after a fire had destroyed much of the abbey and left them badly in need of pilgrims. It's tied to Joseph of Arimathea, to ley lines, to the Holy Grail, to a great deal of modern spiritual practice. Walk up it on a summer evening and you will meet people for whom every one of those things is simply true. And what did I do? I wrote a poem about clay shrinkage. Here's the temptation I was refusing, and I want to be fair to it, because it's not a stupid temptation. The legend is better material, it's more beautiful, it's more moving, and it's already load-bearing. Thousands of people have already done the emotional work of believing it, so a poem can lean on that belief without having to earn anything. Tennyson's Avalon is the proof. Where falls not hail or rain or any snow is one of the loveliest lines in Victorian poetry, and it does its work instantly. The documented version has no such advantages. Bridport sand over Dereham clay doesn't move anybody. It has to be made to matter, line by line, and it may fail. So why refuse it? Because the legend and the hill make opposite claims, and only one of them is checkable. Avalon promises exception from weather. The hill has never had a single year of exception from anything. Gravity is pulling its topsoil down right now. The clay beneath it swells and cracks every summer, on a cycle, without anyone's permission. The tower needs iron bars to stand up. The abbot wasn't healed of his grievous wound. He was cut into 4 pieces at the top of it. The story says the wound closes. The ground says the wound is the ongoing condition. And here is what I think the honest version buys you when it works. The legend offers comfort you have to accept on trust. The hill offers something smaller and sturdier, the fact that it's still there. It's been eroding for millions of years, and it's still the highest thing for miles. That isn't exception. It's endurance, which is the only version of survival actually on offer to any of us, and it doesn't require you to believe anything. 3 questions. If you are facing the same choice in your own writing, and most of us are, more often than we notice, because family stories and local histories and the versions of events everyone agrees on are all legends of a kind. First, who benefits from the story being true? Not cynically, just honestly. The Glastonbury monks needed pilgrims and found a grave. That doesn't make the legend worthless, but it tells you what to weigh. Second, what does the documented version cost me? If the honest account is harder to make beautiful, that's usually a sign you are onto something real, because the legend has been polished by centuries of retelling, and the fact hasn't been polished at all. Third, and most important, does the legend do the feeling for me? If the emotional work is already finished before your poem starts, your poem is decoration. The hill gave me nothing pre-felt. Every ounce of feeling in that poem had to be built out of sand, clay, mortar and a date, and I'm still not sure I made the right call, but I would rather write the hill that's there. And so we come to the end of another walk together. We have stood on a barge with a dying king, being promised an island where no hail falls and no wind blows loudly, a promise he isn't entirely sure of himself. and we have stood on the hill that promise has been attached to for 800 years, where the wind accelerates against the stone, the mortar is blown hollow, the topsoil is sliding downhill, and the clay beneath it cracks open every summer without fail. The legend promises no weather, the hill has never once been spared it. Now, a short reminder before I let you go. Somerset in Verse, Ex Morta Levels in Poetry arrives in paperback on Amazon on the 3rd of September, which is 2 weeks tomorrow. There are no pre-orders, you will simply be able to find it on the day. Glastonbury Tor, the poem you've just heard, sits in that collection near the end of a 100-mile descent that began on the heights of Exmoor. And next week we reach the bottom of that descent, a Bronze Age village built on a floating island of clay in a marsh, a few miles from the hill we have just climbed. Now, before I go, one small thing, and I promise it will stay small, because this isn't that kind of show. If these walks are becoming part of your week, the surest way not to lose them is to subscribe to the podcast. On Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you happen to be listening now. It's free, it's quiet, and it means the next episode finds its own way to you every Wednesday morning without you having to remember. If this show has given you something, following it is the simplest way to make sure it keeps doing so, and it helps other quiet souls out there searching for exactly this to find their way here too. So now on to our competition. If there is a poem you would like featured in a future guest episode, a classic, something modern, or a personal favourite you have carried with you for years, please email me at aldencarrow78@gmail.com. That's aldencarrow78@gmail.com. My email address is in the episode description. Every suggestion is entered into the draw for a signed copy of Somerset in Verse, Ex Morta Levels in Poetry, which I will send to you by hand. The book is also available to buy at Amazon from 3rd of September 2026. The next guest poem will come from one of you. So, thank you for listening, for slowing down with me, and for being willing to look at a famous hill and see the sand. Until next time, may you find poetry waiting for you in the everyday, and I shall speak to you again on Wednesday.